How are we doing? You've been rushing around, I gather. Is your schedule too full? When I speak with groups here, you try and fit everything in. So have you having a good time?
Yes.
When did you arrive? Tuesday morning?
Yeah.
Okay, and where have you been? Wilderness? Okay. Did you arrive in South Africa?
Yeah.
Cape Town?
Yeah.
And just in Cape Town?
Yes.
Can someone tell me what you've seen?
About one person stand up and say everything, please.
Tell me what have you seen?
Robin Island, Tabletop Mountain,
District 6.
all those mountains. District 6,
Cape of Good Hope.
Cape Hope, Cape of Good Point. Couple schools.
All right. And when do you go back?
Go to Johannesburg tomorrow, and then we go back in Friday.
You go to Johannesburg tomorrow, so that's what, Tuesday. And what do you do in Johannesburg?
Good question.
We're going to tour around a little bit in Soweto.
Uh-huh.
We're also going to go visit Nkosi's Haven and Sparrows Village over kind of 24 hours while we're staying overnight there.
Okay. And then you fly back?
Then we're going to spend a day at Landsberg
Yep.
National Park.
Nice. Great.
And then flying.
Okay, which state is your university?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. And what states are represented here? Are you all just Pennsylvanians?
Delaware.
Sorry?
Delaware.
Delaware?
Maryland.
Maryland?
New Jersey.
New Jersey? New Jersey. Okay. All right. And can I get a sense? What age are we looking at?
18 to 22.
Okay, there we go.
I'm 22.
And and what are you studying? Are you studying the same thing or different? Do you have any commonality?
Honors college.
Sorry?
Honors college.
Honors college.
We study leadership together.
You do leadership together. So the purpose of this, how come you're all together here? Is that because of the leadership? Or because you just all wanted to come to South Africa? Leadership and South Africa. Okay, all right. And is your leadership course a year or a semester or longer than a year?
There's 9.
9 courses spread over about 3-ish years.
Okay, cool.
But we did take a class specifically for coming to South Africa.
Yeah.
And what did you cover?
They were preparing for the trip, and we read a book about all the history of South Africa and apartheid. And I mean, throughout our core courses, we've also learned a lot about apartheid as well.
Okay, what book did you read? I guess that's a good one. All right. The questions that I'm asking is just for me to understand a little bit about who you are, because there's so many different places where you can pitch this. All right. So I don't want to spend the next half an hour boring you. The hope is that we can engage with one another, and that it can be a fruitful time and helpful time, engagement with one another. So if I'm on another field, and all of you are on this field, just get my attention and bring me back, okay? That's how we can help one another. It's not easy just coming into a group that I know nothing about. I don't know what your interests are. So your questions or engagement with me will help me to hopefully be a little bit more relevant for your life. Okay, well, from the introduction, you probably gathered that maybe my father should have been here, not me. But you got me, and one of the perspectives that I can offer is what it was like growing up in the environment that I grew up in. Okay, so I'm going to take it that you have some understanding of apartheid history.
Yes.
All right. So I will be very, very brief on that. Anyone want clarification on any of this stuff? You just raise the questions, and then I'll try and give a little bit more personal reflection on what it was like growing up in that. Okay. You know that I can only give a reflection, not the reflection. And it's just very limited to my very tiny, tiny experience of life. All right? And then we can maybe move on to where we are understanding things today, certainly where I understand things, and maybe where we are as global citizens, and maybe what it means to be a leader, what can be expected of us. As we get closer to speaking more about what it means to be just a human being on planet Earth, it may not be comfortable, but hopefully it will be meaningful as we can engage together. So let's have a look. I need to also speak of the context that I come from. I come from a religious context, all right, church context. And so the language that I use and the metaphors that I appeal to and the things that make sense to me are often of a particular genre. I use that genre because it's the only genre I have. I don't have any other paintbrushes to use. I use it not to enforce it on you. I just tell you that those are the only brushes I've got. So if it connects with you, it connects. If not, do the translation in your own head. Okay, so I'm 43 years old, all right, born in 1968. I was actually born in District 6. And because it was during that time, and you were at the District 6 Museum. Okay, that was the church that I was baptized in. And during that time, my dad was the minister there. Because during the time that I was, when I was born, from like 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, where the forced removals really took place over there. There were, as you know, 66,000 people there were forcibly removed. There were 2 mosques and 2 churches, that the one that you're in today was one of them, that were not bulldozed down. Everything else was flattened. So from there, I moved with my family through to Johannesburg and grew up most of my life in Johannesburg. So even though I was born in Cape Town, I lived here for 3 years, but I grew up in Johannesburg. And if you work that out, all of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, all right, that was pretty much the heart of apartheid. Now, apartheid is, and you've worked it out, you've read and you've learnt, okay, so if we've got this huge thing called apartheid over here, like that, it has, it didn't just stand up on its own. Triangle like this can't stand on it, needed support, all right? So there were lots of things, many things that protected it. One was the military, all right? Education policies. There was land bills that were passed. There was, media censorship restrictions, and a whole lot of other things that we can speak about them. That kept. Let me try and address some of those, what it meant to be growing up. Let's start with the media. In 1976, we got TV. That's when TV came to South Africa. There were no TV programs allowed that included the main actor, if the main actor was black. The first TV program on our TV that included the main actor, who happened to be black, was Bill Cosby. It was later removed because Bill Cosby's son, in his room, had a Free Mandela poster. And when the camera moved across that, it was then removed. All right. So media, now that's an example of just how blanket it was. Any program. So the only TV programs that I saw that included black people were when black people were in a subservient position. All right. Now think about what I am growing up with. The only time I ever see a black person really is in a subservient position. That gets into my being, doesn't it? So I go to a school over here, and the school is segregated. I'm not allowed to go to a school with black people. It's segregated. I live in an area, okay, so we've got the Group Areas Act. I live in an area that's reserved only for whites. If you are black and you want to come into that area, you have a pass book, which gives you permission to come in and out. If you don't have a pass book, then you can get arrested. When I was growing up, I used to see yellow vans driving around, and sometimes just people running, and then they'd be caught. Sometimes the domestic workers who had permission to live, very often in a tiny little room in the back of a property, their children, their son or their brother or their sister would come and visit, and they would not have the correct pass, and they'd be arrested. And it happened that was life. So we're living in an all-white area, going to an all-white school. And then we move, and I know I'm moving quite quickly, to the military. In this country, there was military conscription. And conscription was that if you were white and a citizen of this country, then at the age of 18 or after school, after matric, you were called up to the military. Okay. Originally it was 1 year service, then it became 2 years service, so 2 years flat out, and then camps after that you went to. You signed up for that through the education system. So it was when you were about 16 years old, you sent off forms that you were asked to fill in at the school, and that then got your name in there, and then you were... The only way you didn't go to the military straight away after school is if you went to university. And then you would go afterwards. So for a white South African, there's a chair through here. For young men in South Africa, white men in South Africa, the big decision when you got to about 16, 17 years old, the big decision was, are you going to study first or go to the military first? That was the big decision. You couldn't go and work. You had to go to the military or education. The only thing that could delay your military service was education. Now this military here was used to enforce this. All right? And it really is quite simple. If you've got an overwhelming majority of people, so let me use today's figures, if you've got like 40 million black people and only around about 5 million or 7 million white people, to enforce a policy like that, you really do need a strong military. Okay, so we've got education, but media, and if we've got land over here, and we'll just do a tiny little bit of history. We mustn't think that apartheid just started in 1948. That was when the actual system began with that name. It was actually an election slogan. People like, what was we shall win? What was Obama's thing?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Oh my, wouldn't it be good, hey? Yes, we can. Well, the election slogan in 1948 was apartheid. Apart, living apart. Just living apart. Separate development. 1948. But we mustn't think it started then. Already in 1936, and then go further back, 1913, those are the two major land acts. Huge amounts of land were removed from black people's possession. Okay. Now, land is wealth. Let's just take an example of what you have been able to witness. You were in District 6, right? You know the church, you came out there, it was Badenkamp Street. Anything just behind that was District 6. Okay. If you owned even the smallest property in District 6 today, you would be a millionaire in rand terms. Your property would be worth more than R1 million. 66,000 people lost their homes. So they lost their wealth, their capital. So now let's just go back. And my congregation is made up of people who lost their homes. So you just work out. 40 years ago, you lost your home. So you started again. You didn't get money for it. You were chased out. You lost your home, your asset. You were moved much further away. Now you're starting from scratch. You're starting from scratch to build a place, so you've got less money to educate your children, to send your children to university. to use your asset as capital. Can you see the rolling? So we are still, even though it's 2012, there are people in my congregation who still feel the pain and the bitterness of losing their home 40 years ago because of the knock-on effect for that. They would be very wealthy people today. And many of them are very poor. So, but let's even go further back than that, because it wasn't just policies or human rights violations or crimes against humanity, as apartheid is known, start off in different ways. It's not like people set out to say, okay, we want to establish a crime against humanity. No one comes up like that. So let's go right back to, we can go back to the colonization, all right in the beginning. But some significant things. The discovery of diamonds, Kimberley, late 1800s. You've got a big hole in the ground. I want the diamonds, but I don't want to dig them myself. I want to get some other people to dig them for me. The overwhelming majority of black people were very happy subsistence farming, using a barter economy. They've lived like that for centuries. The introduction of taxes. There are a number of taxes, not least a hut tax. So if you lived in a hut, you had to pay a tax. Black people up until that point had never been taxed. Never needed money. We barter. So now people would sit down and they'd say, we've got to pay the tax. I tell you what I'll do. I'll go work on the diamond mine for 1 month. Earn enough money, pay the tax, and then we'll live the rest of the year, 11 months, as we've always lived. Which they didn't. And then the taxes increased, and there were different taxes. So now I've got to work 2 months. Now I've got to work 3 months. Until we got people working 11 months, and it was the whole development of the migrant labour system. If you're a Marxist, a Marxist would say that apartheid was nothing about the colour of one's skin. It was all about economics. It was about the rich exploiting the poor. And the poor just happened to be black. So we got migrant labour right from the 1800s. And then the land. So it wasn't just an Afrikaans thing, as sometimes it's perceived. The British were very, very good at exploiting and excluding. In fact, there was a preacher who came out, who started the church where I am, Barnabas Shaw, and he wrote a letter to Lord Charles Somerset, who was out here, who Somerset West is named after, and he was the governor of the Cape at the time. And because Barnabas Shaw was preaching to both the free and the slaves, the governor refused him permission to do so. Discrimination has been a very long intertwined history of this. So there are many of these things, pillars, that hold one up like that, and which created a very interesting childhood. So I grew up in a group area that white. I went to a white soil education school. I was called up to the military. I refused to go to the military when I was 18 and faced a 6-year jail sentence at age 18. At 18, you don't want to be facing a 6-year jail sentence. You want to be thinking about other things in your life. I managed to delay that for a year, and finally the military caught up with me a few years later when I was arrested. To grow up in these environments here was difficult, especially in the home that I was brought up in, because I was brought up in a home that would teach me about this. But I grew up in a school environment and a friend and suburban environment where the people around me did not know. I was called all sorts of names because of it. But also there was a genuine non-understanding. F.W. de Klerk, you've heard of him? F.W. de Klerk, he was the person who kind of was at the end of the chain of events with Mandela and Mandela's release. And in many ways, someone who could read the writing on the wall. He commented the other day, unfortunately, where it seems, if we've understood his comments correctly, it seems what he still kind of believes is that apartheid was a good system that failed. The people's intentions were good, and it failed. Instead of realizing that it was actually an evil system that succeeded. It succeeded in separating us. You're going to go to, well, Cape Town's one of the most segregated areas. Okay. All the property around this mountain is just hugely, hugely, hugely expensive. The people who lived anywhere near the vicinity of this mountain were removed. And capital has moved and shifted. You're going to go to Soweto in Johannesburg, and that was a specific group area. And it worked like this. I mean, you'd have whites, and you know all the classifications, white, black, coloured, Indian, these crazy social constructs that have just been pinned onto people. And so often society would be, you'd have white, and then you'd have coloured or Indian as kind of buffer zones, and then black right at the end. And these would often just be dormitories where people sleep and they'd come and work over here. Nothing of the economy working over there. So people worked here, spent their money here, went back over there. And quite strict barriers. So that's the kind of environment that I grew up in. You know the story of the two goldfish? Apparently, if you take a glass and separate the two goldfish, they soon realize that they can't swim across because they bump into the glass. So they swim like that.